'Tis I. Hey everyone, glad to see you back, glad to see you looking fresh, and today I wanted to talk about Pokemon that aren't actually Pokemon, but it'd be pretty cool if they were. Now, what do I mean by that? So, in the grand history of Pokemon, there's been a plethora of guys and gals, little dudes and little lasses that aren't real. If that makes any sense. I guess the best way to explain this is Pokemon that you can't catch. Pokemon that aren't their own Pokedex entry. Pokemon that are exclusive to a certain aspect of the media franchise. I'll get into it. I'll start with one that is a light softball. One that is explored more and is the lightest version of this topic here. It's the Spiky-eared Pichu. And he is catchable in the game. So this is the bridge to get you guys into this topic. The Spiky-eared Pichu does exist in Heart Gold and Soul Silver through a very specific event. However, it is completely locked to that game. You cannot transfer it up to Black and White, which means you can't put it in the bank and in the home or anything like that. It is stuck firmly in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. It is a Gen 4 exclusive Pokemon, which is crazy that they made this and they're like, no, it cannot go anywhere ever again. It does exist in other media. It has shown up in the anime. It's in Smash. Every time I play Smash and use Pichu, I always prefer to use the Spike-eared one because I think it is a pretty interesting piece of the franchise that at least is referenced. They understand that people do find it intriguing. However, I wish that the poor little guy could have made it out of Gen 4 and could have just existed. I don't think it needs to evolve. I don't think we need a Spiky-eared Pikachu or a Spiky-eared Raichu or anything. But just being able to send the guy up, like, he feels like such an anomaly because of that. I don't recall any other times that there's been a Pokemon that you can legitimately catch and it's just stuck in a game. So let's jump into some more stuff that do not appear in the games. Let's talk about some anime exclusive ones. The mongoose from one of the very early episodes of Pokemon is one of the strangest anomalies to ever happen. Early Pokemon anime is weird. Pokemon anime as a whole is kind of weird, but it got a more bog standard as it went along. But early anime especially has multiple examples of real-life animals just existing in the Pokemon world. But they're normally like background fish or something like that. And this time, it's a fully animated mongoose, which could exist if they really wanted it to. That could have been its own Pokemon. It's a very basic looking normal type Pokemon, but it very much could have been its own monster. And before you come and say, well, it's a bit too basic, there's just a purple rat, and there's also a Pokemon just called Seal, which is a very cute cartoony seal. And this one they could mess with the name Mongoose in different ways, and there have been a couple Mongoose since then. There's this Gumshoe, there's Zangoose. Like, they've tackled this Pokemon, I guess, if you want to call it the same Pokemon in the future. Or if you just want to say that this is a strange thing from the early days of the anime where they didn't fully connect it to everything yet. Or maybe Gen 10 will have a little surprise for us, and that guy will finally get his due diligence. Sticking with the anime, there are a couple Pokemon that are specific to the anime that are real Pokemon. I'll start with Snorlax. I don't really remember this episode much from a kid. Doing research for this, it was kind of interesting to see, like, oh yeah, that did happen, a Snorlax. And this is technically possible now. If you have a Snorlax in Scarlet and Violet, you can Terra-type it into an Ice type. So technically, this can exist, but this is a bit more different than that. Like, this is a Snorlax that is ice. He's snow. He's different. He's not just a regular Snorlax. But the more famous example would be the Crystal Onix. Now, any fan of the anime back in the day, especially in the Orange Island League, remembers the Crystal Onix, remembers just how cool it looked, remember how it felt to see an Onix made of shimmering crystal, and how many people actually wanted to use one on their team. Lo and behold, they have never, ever, ever mentioned this thing again. It's never showed up in a game, and unlike Snorlax, you cannot get a Onix in Scarlet and Violet. It's just not possible. So the idea of a Crystal Onix, even by a Terra type, isn't a possibility. This is another one that would be incredibly cool if they reference somehow, but just a different form of an already established Pokemon is going to be hard. Him and Snorlax, I think, are just relics of the anime and pretty much to be forgotten. Alright, jumping from the anime into the actual games, there's one Pokemon that you have with you, but doesn't count as a Pokemon, and that's Rotom. Now hear me out, Rotom is a Pokemon that you can catch and you can turn into different appliances, but your Rotom that's in your Pokedex, for one reason or another, it can't battle. It doesn't count for its own Pokedex entry, even though it is the Pokedex itself. You have it with you your entire journey, but you still have to go and catch a different Rotom just to count it. It's very weird circumstances. I kind of enjoyed that they incorporated Rotom and made it such an important part of the Pokemon universe, but it does create this weird question mark of, is it a Pokemon, or is this a Rotom-based Pokedex? Or is there an actual Rotom in this Pokedex? I don't know. I don't know the lore exactly behind it, but it is a strange little anomaly that it's a Pokemon that you can't catch. And so is it really a Pokemon overall? I don't know. One strange subcategory of this whole fake Pokemon thing are the Galarian fossils. They're a very strange monstrosity conglomeration of two Pokemon from a prehistoric era, much like a Kabutops or Ammonite and Aerodactyl back in Kanto. Imagine if they took those fossils, the root and the dome, the root's Lileep, mind you, but say Lileep, the root fossil and the dome fossil, Kabuto, were combined into some strange prehistoric monstrosity. That's what we get with the fossils from Galar. So Dracovish, Arctovish, Arctozolt, and Dracozolt, these poor guys never had a chance. They are monstrosities. Some of them are better monstrosities than others, but they're all a mess. And they're a combination of two fossils that shouldn't have gone together to create one weird whole. I love the reference to the idea of, like, scientists get fossils wrong all the time, but I also would love it if we got to see the real Pokemon that these fossils originated from. I don't know if this will ever happen, but I legitimately believe that it could be a really, really cool callback to such a strange portion of how fossils were. That's because they could clearly point out, they could be like, years ago we thought these are how these fossils worked, but now we've made new discoveries and we've discovered new Pokemon because of it. Would it open an entire conversation within the NPCs of the efficacies of mixing and matching old Pokemon? I don't think so, because they already don't really mind the idea of bringing back long-forgotten Pokemon from a prehistoric era, so I don't see why they wouldn't mind correcting their mistakes now. I mean, there's a reason these Pokemon can't breed, and other fossils can, so let's fix them, shall we? I think the most famous example of this phenomenon of Pokemon that are real, are in the games, but you can't really use them, is the baby Kangaskhan. Now, the argument is made over and over and over again. It's like, well, you can use it in battle, especially when you Mega Evolve a Kangaskhan. That little baby pops out of the pouch and is up to fight. But it's not its own Pokemon. A Kangaskhan is one of those weird early Gen 1 Pokemon where the lore doesn't match up with the rest of the games afterwards because breeding wasn't around yet. So a baby Kangaskhan, it was just one Pokemon, right? A group of eggs calling an Execute, a group of Digletts becoming a Dugtrio, like a grouping of Pokemon being one Pokemon, while it does still happen, doesn't happen nearly as much as it used to. So, baby Kangaskhan, though, is very, very strange because it looks very different, right? You can include this spot here and say, like, well, a single egg in the Execute, or a single Dugtrio portion becomes a Diglett, same with Magneton and Magnemite. So why not with Execute? Why not, like, the tail of a Alolan Executor? Like, there are examples of that as well, where they look different, and I feel like they could be different. It's a little bit different with, like, just the Executor heads, because they're connected to one singular base. But the baby Kangaskhan has been shown, especially in the Mega Evolution, that it can pop out of the pouch, and it can work on its own accord. And the fan theories are that that's what a Cubone is a baby Kangaskhan. They've never fully established that. They've alluded to it multiple times, but they've never come out and said, like, yeah, that's what it is. So, it's an interesting little guy, and I would like to just, even if it's just another baby Pokemon that you have to breed for Pokedex filler, I think it'd be pretty cool if it counted as its own Pokemon. My favorite of this discussion is the Cloyster tail on a Slowbro, and it's always been that. I've always wanted to just have that guy as a Pokemon. I've always thought he looked so cool. He doesn't look anything like a Cloyster. The whole thing was like, oh, a shoulder bites the tail and they evolve together, and it's a strange Cloyster evolution. I just want to use that Cloyster. Now, to rub salt in the wound, they plan to do that. A beta sprite from Generation 2 was just that. It was just the strange Cloyster evolution on the Slowbro tail. So it stings all these years later that they've never attempted and gone back to do that. Because, you know, Gen 2, it can only fit so much on the cart, or they were rushed for time, or a million other reasons that Pokemon was cut and it was never brought back again. I could do another video all on beta Pokemon and what ones I think should be brought back. I think I can just boil that down to right now is I think any beta Pokemon that hasn't been reworked in some way, I think should be and brought back. I think it's just a really interesting subset of Pokemon that never got to be. So I think that they should be given their own chance. And the Cloyster form that is on a Slowbro tail is the biggest example of that. And on top of that, there's also already another version. There's a Galarian Slowbro tail Cloyster in the Slowking hat. He looks different. He has poison now, and you already have a different version of it. It's like you're building the lore of a Pokemon that's not actually his own Pokemon, but it seems like you want him to be. So, I don't know. That's one that I've always really wanted, and I'm absolutely going to bring it up here. The last two examples I have for you today are also in-game, but they are not connected to any other established Pokemon. When you walk into a gym and you see a statue, it is a generic monster. It has wings, it's very stout looking, it kind of resembles like the early game Gen 1, Gen 2 sprites when they're not in battle. But it does have a distinct shape, and it has for quite some time. I would love it if that Pokemon is established at some point. I think they just wanted to be like, this is a Pokemon statue. But no Pokemon really looks like that. No Pokemon looks exactly, has that same silhouette, nothing. So I'd love it if they expanded on that. And also, the Substitute doll, which is another just generic Pokemon substitute. And that thing is iconic. You can buy a real-life plushie of it. Those exist. I wouldn't have really brought this up if there weren't other items in the Pokemon universe like the Pokedoll, which resembles a Clefairy, to where did they get the design for this substitute? Like, the Pokemon just brings out a nothing thing, I guess, of... I don't know. When you get down to it, that doesn't really make much sense. That they put a little standee of themselves, but it's not a real Pokemon. But I would really enjoy it. Again, Gen 10 would be a perfect time to bring that Pokemon to real fruition. So those are my examples of Pokemon that aren't actually real Pokemon, that you can't catch anymore, or Pokemon that they acknowledge are real but don't feel like they are. Do you have any examples of this strange phenomenon? I can think of a couple that aren't as interesting really to talk about, such as there's like the Rabska. There's like a little pupa in the ball. That's always kind of neat. That's a good example too. Like I said, do you have any other examples of this strange phenomenon in the Pokemon universe? Would you like any of these to become real Pokemon? Maybe you don't. Maybe you think they all are good in the lore how they are now. By all means, let me know down below. Thank you so very much for watching, and as always, like this if you like this, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you at some point.